Hello, my friends. Welcome, welcome, welcome to another episode of Unmute. My name is Rabbi David, your Torah Tech Guy, and my goal is to share with you great tech for your great Torah. I want to welcome you to Unmute. Unmute was born out of having to say so many times over the past year, please unmute, or you need to unmute. And what I realized is that telling someone to unmute is not just a technical request. The best Jewish education is when we lift up our students' voices and allow everyone to become a teacher of their Torah. So this broadcast strives to amplify the voices of those who are unmuting their students and adding more voices to the Jewish narrative in digital space. So let's get started. My guest today is the amazing, the incomparable Rabbi Menachem Creditor. Rabbi Creditor serves as the Pearl and Ira Meyer Scholar in Residence at UJA Federation New York and is the founder of Rabbis Against Gun Violence. His are you kidding me? 26 books and 6 albums of original music include A Rabbi's Heart, the global anthem Olam Chesed Yibaneh, which I was honored to record with him, and the anthologies When We Turned Within and None Shall Make Them Afraid. He and his amazing wife, Neshama Karbach, live in New York, where they are raising their 5 children. I want to let all of you know who are watching, if you have questions, please unmute yourself by adding your questions to the chat in either Facebook or YouTube. And yes, I can see that Rabbi Creditor has fallen off, but he's back now. And I promise we'll get to those questions as soon as we can. Rabbi Creditor, how you doing?
Hi, Rabbi David. I'm great. And I got to say, of all the things that blow me away about your many skills, that opening thing was so cool.
Oh,
that was so cool.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. I have fun with that kind of stuff. So friends, listen, there's a lot of Wi-Fi or internet issues that we're all dealing with. So if either of us drop off, we'll try and get back on and come right back on. So I apologize for that ahead of time. By the way, just so you all know, there's a reunion tour being planned right now. We're going to be in our wheelchairs, and Shirav is coming back. But I mean, the truth is, Menachem, like, we never stopped making music, right? I mean,
right.
We
never stopped. And even when we were in the process of making music more regularly, we didn't perform enough for the tour to have ever ended. So this is just the next stop.
It's just a continuation, right? It's just that's very true. Menachem, I wanted to have you on because you've done something really amazing. Hi, Cantor Risa. It's good to have you here. She's watching online with us. You've done something really phenomenal this year, and you've created a community of online learners. So let me just start with what has this looked like for you? How did that come to be, and what sort of drove you to teach the way that you're teaching now?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. And I think my hope is that this is really going to be a model for other people, given the way that we have been successful. So here's a short story. I'm the scholar in residence for UJA Federation of New York. And when March of 2020 came around, all of a sudden we were all dislocated. And my personal investment, by which I don't mean a decision, I mean my need for Torah to be an everyday, all the time experience, and something that I share with people, I was worried was going to go away. Sort of the world disappeared in a blink. I mean, it's like the Avengers. It's like literally a snap, and all of a sudden, so much went away. And probably generated by that worry, I pitched, along with one colleague at UJA, this idea of a morning broadcast that would go on at 9 o'clock in the morning, which would have us welcome people, learn a little bit of Torah, and say goodbye. That was really as simple as it was meant to be. And since we all thought it was going to be a matter of weeks, this was an experiment that we thought we would measure once we were done. Obviously, the experiment is still going on. This morning was broadcast 298 in a row.
Wow.
We haven't missed one weekday morning. something I'm incredibly proud of. So much devotion and personal fulfillment goes into this that even when I was on vacation during December, I couldn't not do this. I don't consider it something that's expected of me by my professional work. It's something that I expect of me, that is a calling of mine. And so what it looks like is that every morning at 9 o'clock, I go on, greet whoever's there, and teach Torah. And the whole thing lasts between 15 and 18 minutes. And the content is really 9 minutes. But I'm pretty sure that the reason why we've had the successes that we've had, by which I mean people tuning in and coming to know each other, even on Facebook Live, where they can't see each other's moving faces,
Right.
Is the greeting time at the beginning, where people really do touch base with each other and have reached out offline and created real relationships. So that's what it's been.
Yeah. So that's the piece that to me is really the intriguing piece. I've been spending a lot of time watching different live streamers talk about content that they put out, and it's important to give people something of value. But the value that you've brought is not just the Torah that you're sharing, it's the connection through that Torah of the individuals, right? I think when we were talking, when the tables were turned and you were interviewing me, one of the things I said to you is that I love when you celebrate people's birthdays or when you say their names. It's just such a powerful piece of the Torah that you share, I think.
I appreciate that. And it's something that is most meaningful to me. It's sort of like the Torah content is the anchor for the real lived experience. But I would say that the technology that we have used throughout all of Jewish history is similar in the way that we should describe it. You can have the fanciest, nicest synagogue, but if you don't use it well as a place for personal connection and meaning, so what if the technology in the walls or the greeting sign that tells you the programming or even the well-dressed staff, whatever this means, none of that is going to work unless what drives it is the connectivity. Which is why I find that these broadcasts are really, how Star Wars, actually separately from Star Wars, also Star Trek, also Doctor Who, also all of these really interesting science fiction shows are actually an exploration of what it is to be a human being.
Right.
You can travel the stars, but what you're really looking for is, what are we? I think that's what this technology allows.
Yeah, I was on a call with the World Union of Progressive Judaism yesterday, and someone put in the comments, which was really fascinating. Someone had asked the question, this was about synagogues and bringing technology into the synagogue. And so they asked the question, how do you deal with people who are uncomfortable having technology in the synagogue? And someone wrote in the comments, a chair is technology. And I'd never thought of that before. That's really interesting. And you sort of just said it in, the walls, the programs, everything that we use is some form of technology. This is just a different form of technology. And I don't want to dismiss the fact that it is jarring, I think, for many people to use technology on Shabbat or Chagim or even just in Torah study. Yeah, I think for some people it feels very foreign to them.
But that was true when we moved from the papyrus that only a few people were literate enough to read, to the idea of a printed book, which was only the 1400s. So when there's someone I was a pulpit rabbi in Berkeley for some time, there was a member of the shul who was in a wheelchair, and they couldn't hold a siddur. So the question was, could they use an e-reader? Well, that's what the siddur was meant to be in the first place, even if it challenges our traditional sets of norms. All of this is jarring, as you said. Every change, even for the best of reasons, that everyone would agree with the motivation, any change is jarring. So the camera that has always been present in the sanctuary for streaming, when you could have a full sanctuary, is suddenly the only way people can connect to their sacred center. Same technology, new and transformed meaning.
Yeah. You said before that this is all about connecting on a human level. Do you have this? I have the sense, and I'm wondering if you do also, that you've actually been able to connect on a human level to more people more deeply this past year, ironically, than perhaps you were able to do before you started teaching this way.
In some ways, yes, but I want to be cautious about grading, which is more, which is less. Because the truth is, when I can see your whole face across a table, and I choose to look into your eyes, right, then I am in deep communion with you, whatever we happen to be learning. Many people choose not to look each other in the eyes, and I understand why. It's very hard to do. Yeah. Philosophers like Emmanuel Levinas have always spoken about that. But being physically present and looking eye to eye, there's nothing that can compare to that. Mm-hmm. What's interesting about these technological platforms, not Facebook Live, but what you and I are doing is an example of what I mean. Zoom and other ways when we look face to face, you and I have to look at each other. We have to see each other, and so it is deep. It is certainly more broad. I've reached with my morning classes people in Saudi Arabia and Pakistan and France and Israel and New York, somehow all at the same time, and strange, wonderful things have come out of it. But I wouldn't say that the pre-Zoom learning was less connective and deep. What I will say in this moment is, what are we going to do with the technology that has invited these mutual gazings, these real soulful looking into each other's eyes, missing each other, loving each other, yearning for closeness? Once we can actually be close, will we be that brave anymore? Yeah, that's a real question. And a related one, what about the introverts for whom this was the most conducive way to have intimate connections because it was safe and self-mediating? Can we learn from this that not everyone wants to connect in the same way, so that as we adapt, we don't leave behind the people that finally found their ways to us? We almost discovered these new entry points by accident out of necessity.
Yeah,
I don't want to lose them.
The Reform movement had an article recently that talked about that we should not think hybrid, but instead call it multi-access. That we now have multiple ways to access. I'm actually giving a Dvar Torah tomorrow morning on Shabbos about the Birkat Kohanim and how we think about that the ultimate, the highlight of the Birkat Kohanim is shalom, right? That God gives us shalom. But actually, I'm going to suggest, and this is not my idea, that the highlight of the Birkat Kohanim is not what God gives us, but how God gives it to us. God lifts God's face towards us. It's as if God looks into the camera at us. God looks into our eyes. There's a gazing that happens in the course of the giving of this blessing. That's the gift. The piece is nice, I'll take it, but the real gift is that God looks me in the eye to give me that gift.
I love that. And I noticed, right? So not only are you using you're breaking the fourth wall, right? Like acknowledging that there's someone behind the camera. It's, I'm really glad you're here. There's something, I think you're right, there's something exquisitely holy about God's wishing to be present in such a tender way.
I've often told a story from my own rabbinical school days that, I'll make this very quick, but it was such a powerful moment for me. When I was studying in New York, I was living in Massachusetts, and so I would take the train down every Monday. I'd go to school Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then train back. And you do everything over and over again, you form habits. So I would sit on the same place on the Acela every Monday morning. I'd get the same snack, the cheese and fruit snack thing. I'd get off in what's it called, in New York, the big...
Grand Central?
Thank you.
Penn Station.
Penn Station. I'd get off at Penn Station. I'd get myself a slice of pizza. I'd get on the 1 and 9. I'd sit on the same place, the 1 and 9. Okay. I did this for 3 years. And it was maybe January of my last year. I did the same thing. I got on the Acela. I sat in the same place. I took the 1 and 9. I sat in the same place there. I got off the 1 and 9, and there was a bench in the subway station, and there was a homeless man on that bench. And I realized in that moment that he had been there for the past 2.5 years, and I had never seen him. I'd never seen him. And in that moment, the bracha, pokeach ivrim, open your eyes, dummy, all of a sudden took on a whole new meaning for me. And of course, I went over to him. I said hello. I gave him a little money, and I saw him every Monday after that. But it was stunning to me how blind I have been throughout my life to so much, how I have not gazed into the eyes of other human beings that sometimes have been right in front of me. And what an interesting opportunity this year has given me to gaze into the eyes of others.
I got to say, first of all, what a remarkable story, and what a traditional Jewish experience and framing for it. I mean, we are taught that the bush was always burning, but Moses noticed it, and that's what made him special. So too is seeing that human being a way of telling an Eliyahu Hanavi story, like an Elijah the prophet story, because who isn't Elijah waiting to be noticed? And if you notice Elijah, then the Messiah is going to come, meaning every moment is one that is full of liberation and possibility, if only you would notice. And the text says this often, im b'kolo tishma'u, even if you would only listen to the Holy One's voice, the world would get better faster. And in this moment, one of the things I also hear you talking about, even if it wasn't intentional, is the notion of privilege. Because you were able to take the train to the Penn Station, to the train, and you didn't notice this guy, and using your framing of it as a way of talking about technology once more, look at what this technology has done to even the most privileged of us. We are knocked down, and we are limited to these frames that are equalizing. Like, what my kids hate this, but why am I a fan of uniforms for school? Because everyone has the same starting point.
Right. We all have the same size
or whatever
box.
This box.
Right.
Exactly. In fact, by the way, a teacher of mine, Josh Kornbluth in Berkeley, he's a monologuist, did a piece that I was involved in for a little while called Andy Warhol, Good for the Jews. And Warhol was famous for making these portraits of everyone the exact same size. So I'm with you.
I learned a while back that David Letterman, on his show, his chair was always a little higher than his guest chair. Oh, you just went totally. Oh, there. Now you're back. Yeah, his chair was always a little. That late night show hosts, their chair is, I don't know if it's universal, but their chair is a little higher. There's and also the guest sits down first before the host when they come in. These power dynamics are absolutely an important piece of what's been happening this past year, and I just want to come back to you mentioned introverts. One of the things I love about sharing and teaching Torah digitally is that people who aren't comfortable speaking also have a way to share their thoughts using chat or using other technologies. And that's not something you have when you're in person. The capacity to share differently than people who are comfortable speaking, getting up in front of a camera and speaking.
Yeah, it leads me to one of the conversations actually that I've been having with a colleague. There are some Jewish communities that organize around traditional notions of halakha, of law and custom, right? That will restrict the ways in which people interact. So there are some communities during the pandemic that would stream, but not do Zoom. And the reason for that is if you can stream, then there's less activity that the individual has to take, and streaming is a more passive way of amplifying what's already happening.
Right.
What's really interesting about the limitations that traditional communities are feeling around this is, of course, they're authentic to Jewish tradition, right? You got to navigate the details. But so often when we aren't in a moment of emergency, we think that the details matter more than the purpose. And the real question is, so many communities that ordinarily would not have allowed changes are allowing changes because it was a matter of our community's life and death, and probably in lots of cases, real life and death for people. Loneliness is a serious physical experience.
Yeah.
And so the real question I think facing all of us right now, and this is one of the reasons I'm grateful for what you're doing, is can we get it right enough that we really save lives, not just amplify Torah? I mean, I think it's a good thing to do, even when it's, quote, just academic Torah, as if there is a thing like that.
Lishma.
But really, right. But the Torah that we're teaching is about feeding people's souls in a way that is needed. So we have to get it right.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, for those of you who are watching either live or on the replay, I know that the video is stuttering on Menachem's end. Don't worry about it. We can hear you clear as a bell, Menachem, and that's your voice is that's enough Torah. Your face is beautiful, but I mean, we can see you now. Now, of course, I said something. Now we're going to have great video and lousy audio. Okay, so let's look forward. Now, you said before we began that what we've done over the past year is interesting, but what we're gonna do is maybe a little more vital. And we can talk broadly. Oh, by the way, I just want to say, if people are interested in the technical side of eye contact, and what I mean by that is, how do I, when my camera is above my screen and I need to look at the text here, right? How do I do that? Give me a ring, pop me a message. There are actually a bunch. I just saw yesterday, what was it called? It's a plexiglass thing that hangs on your screen, and then you put your camera on this little shell. I don't know, whatever. There are a few different really simple solutions so that eye contact can be very real for you. But let's talk about social media for a moment, because you are a master of social media. How do you use all of these different tools to amplify your own voice, to share your Torah, and to make those connections?
Thanks for the question. I want to make sure that I answer your question, but I also want to acknowledge that it always comes back to me, not to the how, but to the why, right? So because I am crazy for Torah, like that is literally the answer to so much of this. I have found a way to make social media work, but that is an ever-changing thing. I was saying to you recently that there used to be a day where I would have an idea, or I'd be traveling to Israel, as you and I have done, and I would post something to my blog, and I'd set the blog up to automatically post it to Twitter, and then from Twitter, I'd automatically had Twitter forward it to Facebook. And that way you could post it once, save the time, and always have a self-enclosed ecosystem. And I currently do something like that because when I have something to share, if it's a longer piece I want to write, I put it on my blog, right? By the way, little plug, menachemcreditor.net, everyone's invited. What I then typically do is I put a link onto Facebook, my profile, Facebook, my page, because Facebook told me now I'm a public figure, I'm not quite a person anymore.
You have too many friends. That's your problem.
You're my friend.
Isn't that a strange thing, by the way? But isn't that strange? Right? That in and of itself is a strange thing. The idea that how you measure friendship on Facebook.
Correct. And Facebook was, I hope Mark Zuckerberg forgives me. I don't really care. I do think that he was lonely, and that's why he called it looking for friends. Will you friend me? Yeah. Like, we're all feeling that. But the deceptive thing, like what an emotional thing it is to have a friend and to officially become friends. Like, I now make friends who say, well, I couldn't connect with you on Facebook. I said, that's because you're my real friend. I need to figure out who's connected with me on Facebook who is not my friend, so I can unfriend them, which I don't actually want to do because I'm sure they're nice, so that I can have my real connection with friends. Look, your question was, how do I get the word out? And the answer is, each ecosystem, each social media platform has its own tone, its own tenor. Some people think of this as relational, and you and I were talking about this too. I don't see most of the social media stuff that I do as relational because I couldn't possibly respond to the volume of stuff that I get back. I am always pouring things out. And if it's Instagram, it has to be a visual thing. That's the only way Instagram works. That's how it was designed. If it's Facebook, the question is, is this a profile thing or a public figure thing? I've decided everything that I put out on Facebook, I have to be comfortable with it everywhere. And if it's something about convening in the real world, please God, just making sure that I make it as accessible to anyone on that platform. So if it's the restriction of Twitter, then it has to be short enough to get someone's attention. If there's a graphic on Twitter, great. But I'll tell you the secret to the whole thing. The secret to the whole thing, at least for me, is you have to do this and not care about the feedback. You have to do this and not measure your likes and fight your own dopamine rush as if that means anything. Look, I got 1,000 likes for this thing. What was it? My cat sitting on the toilet. Right? Cats on toilets will get likes, and deep, visceral, necessary, life-saving Torah will not. That's not only true about social media. I remember being in Northern California having a conversation with the editor of a Jewish paper somewhere. And I said, we're doing this coexistence thing with a Muslim Jewish student body and the Hillel, and we're in a moment of tension with Israel, and it's so urgent that we get the word out. It's real news. And he looked at me and said, that's not real news. When someone throws a brick through your window, that's news. Oy. And that tells you that social media is really amplifying the worst parts of the world. It's not a reflection of anything. So how I get it out, you just got to learn the language, right? That's why teachers like you help people who are intuitive like me to do it better, right? And not caring about how much feedback you get. You know how many rabbis, we know this, count who comes to shul as if one person wouldn't be enough?
Right.
Even if you're the only one in shul, the Talmud tells us God's talking.
I made a joke at the beginning that you and I are doing this reunion tour, and before we got on, I said that it would just be the two of us there at this first concert. The truth is that 25 years ago, when I started making music and performing, I decided then that I'm not doing this for anyone other than myself. And so if I'm the only one who shows up and I'm singing to myself, I'm okay with that. If other people come and enjoy it, wonderful, like added blessings. But I'm doing it for me. And so yeah, when one person comes to shul, that should be enough. I will say, and I don't do this. I don't understand the social media sites where what's it again? Snapchat. I don't understand Snapchat because everything disappears. And when I use social media, it's because I want to put content out. And I think that the problem here is that I'm old, because a really smart user of social media isn't just pushing content out. They are using it as a relational tool. They are, I think.
But one of the, I have to interrupt, one of the questions there is, are they using it as a relational tool to push out a product? So much of social media and the algorithms ends up putting specific products in your line of sight based on your habits, based on what they know about you. But relational is different for us when it comes to the convening of real community than it is for most of the paid advertisers, certainly, or sponsored stuff on social media. What we do is relational, and I have to say, you and I have done, how many funerals have we done? Nothing lasts. You can't take it with you. And even though so much of my writing, let's say, and I've written about this, I want to be as an enduring message to my children, and please God, their children one day. But that's not how it works. The reason why Snapchat is so appealing is because of the dangers of being stupid permanently. Right? We put out things that should not be put out, and people put inappropriate things that will chase them forever. And because people can't get jobs when they've posted themselves doing truly stupid and foolish things that are always discoverable and never go away. And that's why you can hire someone for thousands of dollars to scour the internet for evidence of who you were, right? Snapchat is appealing, and I think it is because we're old that it wouldn't be our thing. You and I are more aware than we used to be when we were children, certainly, of mortality.
Yeah.
Snapchat isn't about getting older. Snapchat is blah, 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 and then it just goes away.
It's the moment. It's in this moment.
Which I have to say, let me also validate it, even though it's not for me. I think it's a seductive place for stupid things.
Mm-hmm.
And we've learned from lots of stories that nothing actually is erased, because if you put something on Snapchat, someone could easily take a screenshot of you and it lasts forever. You can be just, but isn't it nice? Isn't it nice that I can not be subjected to, tormented by a mistake I made?
Yes.
Isn't it nice that sometimes things can go away?
Yeah. Let me ask you about another. This is something that I've just started to explore. Are you on Clubhouse?
No, because I'm a Droid user and they don't have droids yet.
Yes, they do. About 2 weeks ago, maybe 3, they released the Android app. I'm an Android user also. I bought an iPad just so that I could get on it when it launched in January. So for those of you who don't know, Clubhouse is an audio only. I'm not sure how they actually market themselves. I'm not sure if they call themselves a social platform, but it's audio only. So you can jump on and there are all these rooms and you can join a room. And there have been some, there's a room that I was in yesterday called, I think it was called Meet Israelis and Palestinians. And it was a room that had been open for, I think, 3 days. And it was just Israelis and Palestinians just talking. And it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. I was in another room last night with David Breifman from the Jewish Education Project, where we were talking about the Pew Study. And here was my experience. I, for the first time, raised my hand to say something. And they brought me up on stage. On stage, it's audio only, so you can't see anything. And I shared something, and then David responded. And then the next person came up. And I immediately logged off. My experience there was that was not a platform for discussion. It was a great way for whoever the moderator is, whoever has control, to allow one person or whoever they choose to speak. But it wasn't a great platform. What I wanted to do was hear what he had to say and then respond and have a conversation and then bring other people in the conversation. Maybe it was just the moderators of this room, and I'm not knocking them at all, but my experience in that platform was not the same kind of experience that I have in Zoom, for example. And maybe part of that is also that I'm a visual kind of guy. Seeing you is really important to me. My experience is much richer when I can see who I'm speaking to. So what platforms have worked for you? Are you a Facebook guy? Are you a YouTube guy? Are you a Zoom guy? What is working for you and what isn't working for you?
The answer is yes. Right? The answer is yes. They're all working in different ways because they're not answering the same needs. Right? My wife and I have this really great phrase that we say to each other once in a while. "Hakol talui ala tzipiyot." Everything is dependent upon your expectations. So you went into that Clubhouse conversation wanting conversation, but I'm imagining that the Jewish Education Project wanted to have a platform that exposes more people to their practitioners and their ideas. And that's obviously their right to do. Anyone would have the right to use their platform the way that they would like. I like Facebook more because it literally shows me the faces of the people that I'm interacting with. Even if I'm doing Facebook Live, I can see their chat and interact with them. But Zoom is also precious to me because I can see people there. And I'll tell you that they each answer a different need that I have. when the pandemic began and we all jumped on Zoom, I was convening our staff at UJA Federation of New York. We have 450 staff, and it was a precious moment for us all to be together. And I would say a vast majority of our staff was coming together every Friday for just special time together. And I would sit there and we would have this important conversation, or even just the importance of seeing each other. And when one of them would start to leave, and then people would leave, you watch participant number at the bottom of your screen, it starts to go down. It was very emotional for me. Our teacher, I think you've learned also with Erica Brown.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Oh no. See, I said something about the audio and now you're frozen and I can't hear you. Oh my goodness. I think you'll come back. Wait. While we're waiting for you, Menachem might have to drop off and then come back in. Shalom Porter, it's good to see you. And Cantorisa, I see that you're saying here in the chat that it depends on the room. Maybe I shouldn't have been quite so quick to judge Clubhouse. So I apologize for that. And also saying, sorry, I just took over while you jumped off, that she had a great discussion about the future of worship and Jewish education on Clubhouse. So I may have been too quick to join. Sorry, Menachem, you were saying. I apologize.
No, it's all right. By the way, I'm watching on Facebook, the slight delay. I went away. It was so sad.
You're back.
I'm back. No, what I was going to say is that Erica Brown is writing right now on the question of leave taking during the time of Zoom, because we have all of these ways of saying goodbye.
Yeah.
We don't leave meeting. What's that? Suddenly, snap, we're gone? No. We take one last bagel. We walk slowly. We gather our stuff. We talk on the way to the elevator. We stand in the parking lot. That's where real Zizkeit happens. That's where sweetness lives.
How do you leave a Zoom meeting has been a topic of a lot of conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a scholar, Rachel Korazim, who I think is going to be in Erica's work. Rachel Korazim is an Israeli educator, part of Hartman. She says, in every class that she teaches, I'm just going to stay here. You all can go and you need to go.
Yeah.
And there are practices that we develop. You ever go shopping and you notice that, like, you have this conversation, then you say goodbye, but then you see each other in the next aisle. Right? We never actually cleanly say goodbye, and that's better. I think that's better. So, you were asking, which one am I? Am I this? Am I that? I put the stuff everywhere, and sometimes it feels like it fits, and sometimes it doesn't. But that happens at the library, at the supermarket, at the coffee store. The conversation you wanted to have with David Breifman and others, I imagine, would be better had if you were just talking to each other and no one was watching.
Yeah.
Because one of the big issues with social media is how performative it becomes. Mm-hmm. I want to tell you I saw a beautiful flower, and that should be enough. But I've got a phone, and I can put it on portrait mode and get just the right angle and send it to prove to everyone that I saw a flower. But actually, what's important is I saw a flower no matter who's watching. And I stopped. And I thank God that there was such a thing as a flower. And I have eyes that can see it. The thought that I have to share it is actually a problem.
So I have to tell you something. That's fascinating to me. Because you often post pictures of the sky or a tree on Facebook. And I'm thinking back to when I've seen those. And I have sometimes said to myself, that's a beautiful picture. I have never said to myself, wow, Menachem noticed that. He saw that, right? I saw the social media piece of it, and I didn't see what you're describing now. I'm going to look at those differently now.
Yeah, my hope, thank you for saying it that way. My hope is, first of all, that I didn't miss the sky when I was trying to capture it. And my hope really is that by offering it up, someone remembered to look at the real thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Beautiful. Okay. One last question for you. It's sort of a two-parter. It's what have you learned from this past year that you want to carry with you? And at the same time, what do you think? What is in our future? What do we as educators, as Jewish leaders, what do we need to grasp onto, to bring with us, to continue to evolve and be creative with, to reach our post-pandemic Jewish community and world?
Really, really vital question. Well, let me answer the first one. Personally, I have learned that my needs are much simpler than I thought. Just before the pandemic broke out, I was in Selma and Montgomery leading a civil rights mission, flew directly to Washington, D.C., where I was part of UJA's work on the census. Straight from there, I went to APAC in Washington, D.C., and then came back home for some. And I was on a plane, like a lot. And I thought, this is what I need. This is where I need to be. I need to be all these places. But really, I like being home. I'm anxious to go and do work in the world and see places which are not these 4 cubits. That's true. But actually, I've spent more time with my family than I ever would have. And I had a smaller world to inhabit. And I learned that I like it. I learned that I really, really like this quieter life. Now, I said before that my wife and I have this phrase, "Akol talui al tzipiyot," everything is dependent upon expectations. Well, I don't know that my expectations from before were the ones I needed. And I think if I can hold on to this wisdom, I'll be a lot more satisfied with this glorious, simple life that I really cherish.
Have you been into the city? Have you had to go into the office yet?
No, I mean, it's been 15 months. I mean, I miss my library. I've been doing this work of nonstop teaching without my books, and that's...
Thank God for Sefaria.
Right, thank God.
By the way, Sarah is on with me next week. Sarah Wolkenfeld from Sefaria. She'll be here next week. So, thank goodness.
Yeah, thank God for them. I've introduced some of my students to Sefaria, and I can actually do the real-time click and look at this reference and, oh my God, look at that. This is awesome. Yeah. There's no question that Sefaria has transformed our learning, but even without it, I've had to look within here and make do with the books on my shelf. And actually, I'll tell you one other thing that I've gained is the recognition that my shelves were almost entirely male, white, and Jewish. And that's not good enough. And so as I needed books, I actually began to think, because of everything else that was happening during the pandemic, am I listening to different kinds of voices so that I can learn more, or am I looking into the mirror all the time? That's been big for a TED Talk.
Yeah.
It would be a really angry one. I don't know that anybody would watch it. But I think that we have put up with mediocrity in our Jewish community for a really long time. I think that mediocre leaders, professional and lay, clergy and educators, executive directors and presidents, and I don't mean people who meant well I mean people who had been told their whole life, oh, you want to be an educator? You're an educator. And I know that there's something sweet about that. Torah doesn't belong to those who've been professionally trained and isn't only an intellectual thing, but there are so many ways to embody Torah. But it takes a life to earn the right Torah. And what's interesting about this moment of technological freedom is anybody can broadcast. Anybody can start a clubhouse room. Anybody can go live. Anybody can this, anybody can that. And the torrent of Torah that has been poured out exceeds any moment in history. And the real challenge with that is that either we're going to all have gotten better at it, or we're all going to think that you can still go live even if the first time you learned Torah was right before you pressed the button live. And the need for real grounded learning and growing and tending. I wouldn't go to a therapist who didn't know what they were talking about, who could print up their degree because they could get on Word and just type the word degree. You know, we need leaders who are devoted to the depth of our tradition to rescue us from the chaos of not news reactivity. We need that kind of depth of Torah so that we can become grounded in a tradition that's strong enough to remember how hard last year was and brave enough to imagine something better, right? So I think what's next is going to be a big mess. It's going to be a big mess.
I would only add to that I hope that those leaders, that those educators also have the capacity to do enough tzimtzum to allow those who don't have the depth of learning to share their own Torah in meaningful and appropriate ways. The democratization of everything, as you said, the fact that you've self-published 26 books. You couldn't have done that 15 years ago, 10 years ago. It's I've self-produced. We've both self-produced albums together. The fact that everybody can do everything is a blessing, I think, and sometimes presents challenges. And so I hope that those leaders who really demand of themselves learning and deep reflection and deep preparation for the sharing of Torah are able to unmute, as it were, their students when appropriate and to hear their Torah.
Yeah, if I could only add a drop to that, it's that in the act of unmuting the student, there's a reminder that the teacher always has so much to learn. It's not just a phrase.
Yeah.
And my favorite teaching in all of Midrash says that really simply in a chapter of Proverbs that some of us sing to each other Friday nights, right? Pia potcha b'chokhmah, the Torah chesed al-lishonah. Her mouth is opened with wisdom, and the Torah of chesed, of love, is on her tongue. The beauty of that is the rabbis immediately use their logic and they say, wait a second, there's a Torah that's about love. Does that mean that there's a Torah that's not about love? And they say, a Torah that you learn without the intent to share it is not a Torah of love. And so saying it in a positive way, using the framing I think that you just gave it, right, is if I am in a position of privilege, I'm positioned as Torah, I'm positioned as teacher, right? In order for it to be a Torah of Chesed, I really do need to share it. It's supposed to be shared. But if I want to do it in the most loving of ways, sharing it means I have to give some of it up. So as you've said, unmuting, which is only one way of saying it, I need to mute myself and wait.
Yeah.
That's going to be a nice and kind way to make our way through the sacred mess that's ahead.
Yeah. I love that sacred mess. That's beautiful. Menachem, I've taken up enough of your time. People can find you. You said rabbicreditor.net?
It's menachemcreditor.net and Rabbi Creditor everywhere.
And if they want to learn with you on weekday mornings, where do they find that?
Thanks. You can find me on UJ Federation of New York's Facebook page.
Okay.
And if you go to menachemcreditor.net, there's a link to it. You can always find your way there.
Good. Okay. Hey, right. I love you.
I love you too.
Thank you so much for taking the time and having to log on multiple times. I'm sorry about the internet, but really your Torah is what you've been able to do this year. I think should be instructive for many of us as we imagine what our own Torah looks like in the future. So I'm really very grateful to you. Thank you.
Amen. Love you too.
Yeah. So friends, I want to invite you to go to menachemcreditor.net and definitely learn with him. I do on weekday mornings over at the UJA Federation New York. I think I said that right. Facebook page. Definitely learn with him. And while you're online, I want to invite you to head on over to TorahTechGuy.com. You can watch tons of videos that I do 3 each week. Torah Tech Tips on Tuesdays, Unmute on Fridays, and on Sundays there's a special Synagogue Tech. We're not having one this Sunday because we did one yesterday in the afternoon. But all of those are just out there. They're for you. They're resources. And we have some actually really exciting announcements. I have some really exciting announcements coming up this summer of new projects that we're beginning to help you with the best tech for your Torah. So until next time, have the most wonderful Shabbos. We'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.